Small quads, it's an epidemic, affects millions of people across the world every year. And you know what? It's a shame that quads have been stigmatized so much because back in the day, in the glorious 90s, nobody used to ask if you skipped leg day. All you had to do was hit your curls, put on a brightly colored pastel tank top with designs like from the intro to Saved by the Bell, and then wear basketball shorts that go past your kneecap. But now you will get judged on the girthiness of your legs. Now, the first thing we have to do is get to the bottom of your issue. Is this a quad-specific problem? Your glutes and hams are meaty and robust, but your quads are thin and sinewy. That's a very different problem than if you just have a general lack of maturity in your lower body. Now, if that's the case, my advice is going to be to just find something that you like to do that you're going to stick with, work on progressing it forward until you've proven that you've gotten good at it, then assess. However, if you've got to the end of that road and you're still having trouble, that's what brings us to this video and the topic at hand. If it is a problem specifically with your legs growing, we can assume a couple of things. You're probably not getting a sufficient stretch. You're probably not doing a good job of disadvantaging the quads by getting your knees forward. And you're probably not doing a lot of work that includes any of those things. So the first big point is to make sure that we are disadvantaging the quadriceps thoroughly, that we're taking the glutes and hams out of the equation, the quads are getting stretched, and that the knee joint itself is getting moved very far away from the center of mass. Leggy lifters are going to have a big problem with this. Generally, squatting is awkward. Usually they have to shift the hips way back in order to compensate, where the posterior chain takes over, and they usually have a hard time moving the knees forward. But even if you're not leggy, if you just have tight ankles and hips, you might find it difficult to get your knees in a position using regular free weight type squatting movements. Now, you should take solace in knowing the fact that very long-legged lifters can actually get good at squatting. Ronnie Coleman had pretty long femurs and he hit his squats and his leg presses and hacks deep as shit. And there's plenty of Olympic lifters who are similarly built who are able to pick up cigarette butts off the ground with their cheeks. So my recommendation to everybody, if squatting or any type of compound leg movement is a priority for you, work on mobility, get your ankles loose, get your hips loose, learn how to sit down in a very upright position and shove the knees forward. Now, the quick workaround for that for right now is to just elevate your heel. Anything that gets your heel up is going to allow you to push your knees forward more easily. This is the reason behind Olympic lifting shoes. Now, you don't have to go buy $200 Romalios to do this. The easiest way to do it right now, the old school trick, is to put plates or a board under your heels. Anything that elevates your heels 1 or 2 inches, you're going to be amazed. Your knees can go way forward. It's immediately going to allow you to get a lot more work in the quadriceps specifically, because that joint is further away from the center of mass and the hips are closer. So hips have an easier time, quads have a harder time. Now, I actually went ahead and got a slant board that's rated for quite a bit of weight so I could really exaggerate this. And you'll be amazed at how quickly your quads start to burn when you are in this disadvantaged position. You can go slow, you can feel the movement, you can load yourself with things like goblet squats and really find where the quads are working. So that's a really great tool that I recommend if you are having trouble getting in that position. And it's also really great for strengthening your patellar tendons, which is going to allow you to handle more work down the road anyways. Now, beyond this, you can select movements that force you into this position where you're upright and you're forced to push your knees forward. Is going to come in the form of things like goblet squats and front squats, having the weight in front of you. It makes it easier to stay upright, but it also kind of demands that you stay upright. Again, knees shooting forward is going to be much easier. It's going to be almost intuitive, which is why people associate something like a front squat as being kind of a quad dominant movement. And then beyond that, you can really exaggerate it, really just give your quads the business. Things like sissy squats, on your toes, knees going way forward, leaning way back. That kills a few birds with one stone, because on your toes, it's easy to get the knees forward. Now you have a very deep stretch in the quads. In addition to that, the quads are loaded insanely at that position. A Nordic reverse curl or Nordic knee extension, whatever you want to call it, is going to do something similar. Again, deep stretch and really loaded in that position. It's a hallmark of a good hypertrophy movement. Now, the last point of this is to mind your knees, because if you're not used to this and you just start going ham, you can feel your knees start to get dodgy. This work should strengthen your knees over time. It should get those tendons rigid, but that only happens if you do a buildup that is steady enough that it gives those tendons time to adapt, because it does take a while. So instead of loading up the weight and bouncing out of the bottom, make sure you can accommodate the position, make sure you can execute control. If you're not used to it, I do recommend doing a slight tempo and a slight pause at the bottom. That brings us to what you do once you find these positions. So the second point, after you've stretched the quads, after you've pushed the knee forward and disadvantaged that joint, is to get to the point of strain. People generally think higher reps for hypertrophy, but then they'll do leg work, and when they start to do the higher reps with effort, it fucking burns, and it burns like crazy. So the high rep work is kind of mitigated by the fact that they're likely to not go very hard, or if they do go hard, they're not going to go for very many sets. So the people that do grow, either they're just responders to that type of work. I responded very easily just from squatting and progressing weight forward. Or they're people who are psychos and who love pushing through that burn to get to failure. Or they're psycho enough to where even if they don't work very hard, they're still doing a lot of work, so accruing a total amount of volume. The average person isn't going to fall into any of those camps, and they have to find a way to get to those vinegar strokes, get those money reps at the end that are responsible for growth. One of the easiest ways to do that, bypass the burn. Don't worry about the metabolic stress. Don't feel obligated to turn every leg workout you do into a bloodbath where you have to imagine your family getting kidnapped by some barbarian horde and this set is going to save them. Whatever shit you have to do. You shouldn't have to dig up 10-year-old trauma in order to push yourself through a run-of-the-mill regular-ass quad workout. So lower reps are great to bypass this. We know that sets on the order of 5 or 6 reps, very good for hypertrophy, about as good as far as we can tell, at least in the short term, as higher reps. So if you're reaching that point of strain and you're doing so in these positions, you're going to get stimulus and growth that you would not have gotten if you were holding yourself accountable to do these unreasonably hard workouts while ultimately failing to do them and falling short. You got to give Ripito his due. Hard 5s, and I would say hard 6s, the learned man's 5s, great for hypertrophy in the quads, especially if you're maintaining the position that we talked about. Now, another tactic that makes leg movements closer to upper body movements is to not rest in between reps. And if I'm doing 8s, 10s, 15s, and I am focused on hypertrophy, generally I'm not resting at the top because mechanically you're so strong at the top. Again, you can turn it into a rest pause set, and that brings in like cardiovascular conditioning. Your blood pressure goes through the roof. It takes you longer to recover in between sets. It's a fucking mess. So instead of doing that, just get to those end reps that you're chasing faster. And you do that by not resting at the top. You can call them pulse reps, constant tension reps. I did this through a 70s powerlifter, available through my app at basestrength.com. And my wife has been telling me every day that my legs and ass are bigger than they've ever been. I ran through a basic volume workout, but the big change I made this time around is that I didn't stop at the top. So every bit of progress I made was in the context of no rest in between. Metabolic fatigue builds faster, but it's easier for me to get to those later reps without systemically getting so blown. And especially if you put that to exercises that have a better stimulus to fatigue ratio, like leg presses or machine work or single leg stuff, you're going to notice that you can get to that point of strain that grows you so much quicker. Now, the last point of getting to strain is to learn how to add some finesse. I don't want to go all like mind-muscle connection, but as we move away from compound movements, think about smaller movements. Think about what it takes to get that strain where you want it. Things like leg extensions, things like different types of unilateral exercises. Instead of trying to add 12, 15, 20 plates to each side of the leg press, learn how to get through the set without your head looking like it's going to pop like a zit. And you can do this by slowing down, feeling where that point of purchase is, where the muscle's working. And as you go through a pause into kind of a slow concentric and then a controlled eccentric, you're going to feel that muscle start to quiver. Now, people will talk about the importance of a fast, all-out concentric to get maximal motor unit recruitment. That's always important for strength. For hypertrophy, that is important, but really only for the last reps. Again, if we're following some general thing that looks like the effective rep model, then it's those last reps as you get close to failure, that's where you hit the gas. If you're a strength athlete and you've ever gotten used to just blasting through a movement because it's speed, 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 and most of the reps you ever do on a deadlift or squat are fast, 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 every step along the mid-range of that repetition, you're not accustomed to having tension on the muscle. And it's a very different adaptation. So strength athletes know that when you start to spend more time, when you do like pause reps or tempo reps, where you're spending more time in those vulnerable positions, you adapt to it. Hypertrophy, it's not really any different. Slowing down, getting a sense of what the muscle is doing at the stretch, part way up, halfway up, then closer to lockout, and then contracting fully under control, that gives you something extra. It adds to the skill of what the muscle is doing. And I'm telling you, as you get good at it, you can pay that forward to those all out maximal reps where you are going as hard as possible. And then lastly, this is my favorite topic, is volume. Now we put things in order of quality of the movement to make sure you're in a good position, then quality of effort to make sure you're getting to that point where you get a growth worthy stimulus. Now we need to do more of that same work over time. In the beginning, you're really only going to need the position, the effort, and then progressing that forward. Simple progression doesn't work forever. If it did, that's all anybody would do. Eventually, when you get stagnant, you need to pull out something else. The easiest thing to do that's going to grow you is to add volume. One of my favorite tactics. Again, this is what I put right in the middle of 70s Powerlifter, even though it's not a hypertrophy program. It leads to those numbers at the end. The beginning, pure hypertrophy, because you're going 3 sets, 4 sets, 5 sets. You hit this crescendo. Those 3rd and 4th weeks are brutal. And then you reset, you allow recovery, you build back up. And the growth effect is just, it's crazy. You end up handling volumes that you've never been used to before. So if you start with a mentality that you start with quality, once you get the quality down, then you adapt to more of that quality work, you are never going to have trouble growing. Now, frequency is another option, adding in a second day, but again, you want to be mindful of your recovery. If you have another deadlift day on top of that, God help you if you're a strong man and you do event work, be mindful with the new range of motion, the stretching, the extra demands. More stress on your quads does mean more stress on your knees. So that's one thing I like to tell people to be mindful of. I know for myself, for long periods of time, my knees would get dodgy if I tried to do twice per week, and that's with my good squatting leverages. Nothing wrong with going once per week, getting your work in, optimizing recovery for that 7-day stretch, letting the inflammation come down. And when you feel good, going back and hitting it again. You do not want to become dependent on ibuprofen in order to get through your leg workouts. That's a great way to get a hole in your stomach. Then how are you going to get all the protein down to add those 5, 10, 15 pounds of lean mass onto your legs and your backside? You're not going to be able to. So keep yourself healthy. Let your body tell you what amount of stress you can handle and then go from there. So that's all I got for today, guys. Let me know what you think. Do you have trouble growing your quads? Have you tried any of these tactics before? Leave it in the comments. And if you haven't checked out basestrength.com, that's where my blog is up. All of my rants I put on Instagram, all of my rants I do here, I have that compiled on the blog over there, more thoroughly edited, a little less manic and all over the place and scattered. So if you like reading and you can tolerate my ideas on things, you might want to check that out. Also, if you have questions about Base Strength AI, we are opening up the Facebook page, the Base Strength Facebook page for questions. You can leave them there. Huge community of people there that have been following this stuff for a long time. Very helpful people, and I'm answering questions there as well. Thank you so much, guys. Until next time, this is Bromley. I'll see you.